Good morning, everybody. This is the Real Freedom Show. This is take two, actually. My brain is, pardon me, an itch. My brain isn't quite used to this new intro. When to start talking, when to not talk. I don't know. Anyhow, this is the Real Freedom Show. I'm your host, Rocco DeLeo. This used to be called the Rocco DeLeo Show, if you do remember. I did change the name because nobody knew who the heck I am, and it doesn't really matter. What I want is people to look through their iTunes or wherever they get podcasts and maybe come across something with the American flag and Real Freedom Show and go, hey, this is something I want to listen to, because that's how I find some of my podcasts. Most of them I get from word of mouth, but every once in a while I'll come across something like that. And if it were the Joe Schmo Show and I didn't know who Joe Schmo was, I wouldn't even think twice. So that is the reason why I changed the name of the show. Anyhow, there's so much going on in society right now, and I've got lots of itches if you're watching the video. There's so much going on in society right now. It's just a crazy time in America, and I don't want to talk too much about what's going on. I think plenty of people are talking about that, and I'm getting burnt out on everything going on. But the guise or the reason for my show, what I like to write about, what I like to talk about, really I want to build the foundation for people who are arguing about what's going on right now, people who argued 10 years ago, and people who argue about whatever they're arguing about 10 years from now. My goal is to help build the principles, the base principles of where you form your opinions at. So we're arguing based on facts. Discussing, learning based on facts rather than just trying to figure things out and picking a team jersey, because that pretty much is what everyone seems to be doing nowadays, is picking a team jersey and just kind of going with what they say. And you see this all the time, and I think we're so saturated that nothing really impacts anybody, but you could see a video of one person saying, I believe in this 5 years ago, and them beating somebody down for saying, I believe in this now, and pretending like it never mattered. And even in the face of someone showing the facts of exactly what they said, they just ignore it. Like it doesn't matter. And like only certain people are able to change their mind or, progress in their views and stuff or whatever it is. The bottom line is that there are some core principles to our society, to our freedom, that ensure our freedom, that most people aren't really talking about, because they're talking about stuff that are sort of above or below, however you want to look at it, but they're not as important on the whole totem pole of importance. And it may be by design, people who are trying to just sort of take our freedom for whatever reason, by design create this chaos, so we're arguing about stuff way off in left field, instead of in the meantime, we're giving up our core freedoms, or we're letting them slip away. And in most stuff, people don't even know the basics of of our core freedom. So I want to get into something that I wrote here. I'm going to read it, and I guess we could call this argument. I wrote this article. I wrote this on a plane, and I called it Fairness. But I almost think I should change the name of it, and we'll see when I publish this on the podcast feed. A tale of two arguments, and we'll get into it here in just a minute. It's basically an argument between capitalism, free market capitalism, and socialism, and not just the argument between those two things, but the argument of what the argument is about, which I think is the real problem. We are arguing, and I come from the political right. I don't know if I'm a libertarian or a capitalist or a conservative. If I could say that. It doesn't really matter, right? I come from more of a small government, or keep government out of my business, rather than from the left or from, a larger government. Just in fairness, just to show you what my bias is. But this is the argument that I want to make, but I want to argue on the principles. I don't want to argue about the stuff going on right now. Other people could do that. I'm not very good at doing that. But I just want to stick with the principles here. So much of the argument today for a move towards socialism is around fairness. While free market capitalism is not purely a fair system, it is the only system that has a true element of fairness. Socialism, or any form of planned government, will use equity, equality, or fairness as a ruse to bring people in by the heart. In the end, however, it will prove much less equitable than our system of free markets. The socialists today will do their best to avoid the argument of facts altogether. It is quite interesting to me that the word socialist is being used. Politically, it used to be a dangerous word to use. Today, it's almost chic. Of course, it's a lovely and comforting modifier. Democratic, as in democratic socialist, makes it seem less gulag and more amber waves of grain. The fact is, the socialist would have you argue that the socialist versus capitalist argument is between everyone getting what they should or what they deserve based on some universal and absolute standard of what is right. This is the socialist version of socialism versus individual shares being determined by good luck or bad luck, the socialist version of free market capitalism. Let me repeat that again, because this is a whole center of my argument here. There's two real arguments. One that I believe is a false argument or red herring. I'm not sure I'm using that word right. This is my opinion, and this is Hayek's opinion, so you could disagree with me. But so again, this is the socialist version of the argument, and it's a hard one to argue against. They set themselves up to win the argument, except I will argue, and Hayek and most libertarians and conservatives will argue, that this is a complete fallacy. The fact is, the socialists would have you argue that the socialist version, the socialist versus capitalist argument, is between everyone getting what they should or what they deserve based on some universal and absolute standard of what is right. This is their version of socialism. It sounds pretty cool, right? It's hard to argue against everybody getting what they should or what they deserve based on an absolute standard of what is right, versus individual shares being determined by good or bad luck. And this is the socialist version of capitalist and free market economy. And this is defined by Hayek. And some people jump in and argue even that. We'll argue all this stuff. So, it's my show. I'll sort of pick the rules here. So if one reads this argument as the truth, the only fair option is to seek to control luck by planning, right? We're not going to argue on facts. We're going to change the facts so there's no arguing against socialism. After all, and I will, if you stick with me through this episode, I will give you my argument against that. After all, working hard, risking time, health, energy, and resources for simple luck doesn't seem like a good bet when the government could guarantee an outcome. This argument, as Hayek points out, has significant flaws. So here's Hayek's argument, and this argument, my untrained, uneconomics 101 mind thinks, and I believe most free market capitalists, libertarian, people on the right, conservatives, and I think most people who really study economics would agree with this. Not everyone, but Hayek argues that the true argument or choice is between a system where a few people decide who gets what and when. This is the socialist argument. This is socialism from Hayek's point of view. And one where it depends on the enterprise and ability of the people, as well as an element of the unknown, free market capitalism. So rather than an altruistic government harnessing luck and spreading it fairly throughout the land, the government of the planner, the socialist, picks winners and losers. The challenge in intellectual circles, especially on college campuses these days, is that we aren't arguing with the same set of facts. True discourse and understanding or argument starts at a mutual understanding of what it is we are arguing. Before we can get an honest discussion with proponents of socialism, we must first help define socialism itself. So the thing is, and I'll get into this here in just a minute here, if we're at Thanksgiving dinner with a family, with our socialist friends and our family, first of all, we need to remember these are our friends and our family. We love them. And that's more important than all this stuff, right? But if we decide to have this conversation with them, we need to first define the rules of the game. And if they don't want to discuss that, you don't have the argument because there's no point in it. It's arguing in a whole different plane of reality. And if you can't get them to that point where, hey, this is what socialism really is, and this is what free market capitalism is, now let's discuss the difference. You just have to let it go. I mean, that's the bottom line at some point, because that's why people are scratching their heads and banging their heads against the wall going, why don't you understand this? Because, listen, they're on the other side, and they believe as much as we believe, or as much as I believe, their side of this. Some of them are not very smart. Some of them are very smart. So I just don't know, and I don't want to make judgment statements. But until we could get to that point in the argument with like an individual, with a group of people, it just doesn't matter. So that's why I think this stuff here is important to discuss and to learn. Some people will get it. Some people will read this and they'll go, oh, this is really interesting. Teach me more. And I've done this, right? So as I stated earlier, it's hard to win an argument against a socialist if we are using their definition of socialism and free market capitalism. The entirety of The Road to Serfdom does a good job of this. Not everyone's going to read The Road to Serfdom. Not everyone has the time or cares to do it. And I've read it like 5 times because I'm an absolute nerd. Most people aren't as nerdy as me. Listen to my episode, and I'll put a link in the show notes, put the problem with central planning for a few more basic facts on this too as well. And I'll summarize it here. So as I've discussed in previous posts, the government of the planner is limited in information and is bound by time and location. Remember that to achieve anything close to a socialist utopia, which is the stated goal of any socialist, or at least the attempted end, they must be omniscient and omnipresent. That means they are all-knowing and all-present all the time, everywhere. They must have more information and be better able to communicate it to everyone than all business owners, shopkeepers, bankers, deliverymen, and everyone who makes moment-by-moment decisions that affect the economy. That's basically every human being, in order for the best of the best social argument to even be possible. What does this look like in everyday life? As Hayek argues, the socialist aims more to control the means of production rather than overtly telling you where to shop, if that makes sense. In a fully socialist state, there's no nuance here. Rather, the state controls everything because the citizen has very little purchasing power. And listen, here in the United States, even the people that are proponents of democratic socialism, we're not there yet. I believe, as Hayek says in his book, that would be the ultimate road, regardless of the intentions of Bernie Sanders or Ocasio-Cortez or any of the people that are proponents overtly or covertly proponents of some form of socialist government that eventually, and that's why he calls it the road to serfdom, because it doesn't just happen overnight like, oh, wait, we're socialists. It happens, and it's a slow boil. You don't even really notice it. So this, let me get back to my words here. This is either because the inflation is so high as to nullify the power of one's paycheck, or the taxes are so high that there's not much left over, or both. Remember that the argument that gets us in this situation is that for fairness. The socialist argues that he can guarantee, that's the magic word, he can guarantee. And listen, it's not always guaranteed, but that's the word a lot of people say. But they'll say, we have a better chance of the outcome rather than leaving things up to chance, which again is his name for free markets. He and again, go back to my episode on the iPencil too, and I was talking about emerging markets. This stuff is, I mean, is that what it's called? Emergent markets. Russ Roberts. I can't remember the name of it. I put a link to it a while ago. Look at Russ Roberts' Emergent Markets. He has like a video on this. It's so cool how he explains it. But I totally understand how people who don't study this or who don't really understand it can be like, wait, this is really magic. It looks like magic. And, you know, obviously people don't believe magic exists. So, well, this can't be. This just happened by luck. This is what people believe, that emergent markets, which is basically the economy that happens, sort of happens out of, it looks like it happens magically. No one's telling people what to do. This is the market tells people what to do. And it's scary if you don't understand it. I totally get that. So the socialist argument is that he can guarantee the outcome rather than leaving things up to chance. He gets this wrong in 2 places. First, he cannot guarantee any outcome, fair or unfair. That's the thing. He can't guarantee it. Perhaps he could guarantee everyone lives in poverty, and he will have and will have very little. But that's not the argument he's making. He argues that everyone will get their fair share. Okay, well, what's my fair share? What's your fair share? Who is he? Who's a socialist? Who are you to decide what my fair share is? Secondly, his argument is flawed because the free market is much more than chance or luck. Sure, it has a component of luck, but much more than that, it is the component of skill. In a free market economy, skill is a difference maker. We can define skill in many different ways: ambition, actual raw skill in a trade, acumen, personality, entrepreneurship, and so on and so on. These are the types of things that history tells us led to the advent of the automobile rather than a bigger buggy, the computer, smartphone, vaccines, and cures, etc. This was most certainly an element. There was most certainly an element of luck, aka timing, in the creation of things. But no one would argue that Steve Jobs should not have been able to leverage his talents to create Apple Computer, would they? Where does the planner get involved? What does it look like when he smashes the drive and opportunity of the next Steve Jobs? It won't look obvious and you won't see it. Hayek is clear on the importance of means of production. To clearly understand his argument, that one that I share, must grasp I've had way too much coffee, friends. You must grasp the concept of the omniscient and omnipresent dictator, as I briefly mentioned a few paragraphs back. Socialists, if you don't get that, then we can't have it. If you don't understand what that is, Google it, study it a little bit more. If you want to have this discussion with me virtually, right? Or if you want to be on the same plane as Hayek, right? And Hayek is well respected, at least on the right, with libertarians. If you understand, this is the whole point of it. The omniscient and omnipresent dictator, which obviously doesn't exist, is the only way to have socialism really work. And we could even argue that, because is he altruistic? It doesn't exist, right? Only God is omniscient and omnipresent, and a bunch of people don't even believe in God. I digress. Socialists have no real arguments to refute that. They typically refuse the argument altogether. Does that make sense? That didn't make sense. I've read this several times, even though sometimes, even when I get going, I don't enunciate in the right places. So socialists have no real argument to refute that. So they typically refuse the argument altogether. There we go. Pointing instead to the failings of the current system and we must do something reactionary argument to the obvious failings, I'm doing finger quotes, to the obvious failings of free market capitalism, since it hasn't made every person wealthy. In essence, they will claim free market capitalism a failure because it is not 100% perfect. Friends, I'm not arguing. No one is arguing that free market capitalism is perfect. For them, they believe that a few puppet masters, planners, at the top are much more suited to make economic decisions than the mass of individuals. Where'd I go? They leave out the necessity of the planner to make any and all decisions, for there to be any guise of fairness and effectiveness. Let's read that again. They leave out the necessity of the planner to make any and all decisions, for there to be any guise of fairness and effectiveness. Or, of course, they don't understand socialism and are falling for the socialist version of the government. These are the people that Lenin dubbed useful idiots. Again, they don't talk about. They don't argue that for socialism to be effective, that you have to have this all-knowing and all-presence. They will argue and they'll look you in the face and tell you that, well, the planner, the government, they can make these decisions better than every single person. And again, go back. I'll go way too long here to really discuss this, but go back and listen to the problem with central planning, because it digs deeper into that and the real problem with that. So now for the planner's involvement. The planner, in order to be effective, needs to be obeyed and has no time for explanation. He will need to make quick decisions, and a lot of them. In my life, when I need to make numerous decisions about similar issues, I try as best to systematize the process. Certain things are simple enough to build an SOP. It's a standard operating procedure. We see these in businesses a lot as well. The larger the business, the more SOPs one sees. This limits the variability in outcomes and makes decisions nearly automatically. Think of the benefits the planner has in an SOP. Every industry, every job, every supplier, every nuance can be connected by an SOP of sorts. Remember, this is the reality we're dealing with, friends. If the planner were omniscient and omnipresent, aka God, he wouldn't need these tools, right? These are dehumanizing tools. And there are times where it's okay to be dehumanized, right? When we're talking about here's a process to approve an expense report. It goes here, here, and here. These three people do it every time. It's automatically. It doesn't need a human factor. This makes me feel good to be able to approve this, but not this. That's not that's not always the case. Technical difficulties here, friends. If the planner were omniscient and present, he wouldn't need these tools. Again, as the system grows in size, so does the complexity and the necessity of the complexity of the system. Say that again. As the system grows in size, so does the complexity and the necessity of the complexity of the system. Does that sound like something you want to be part of? It needs to grow and it needs to get more complex. It's insane. The system only works if everyone is in lockstep. Can you say the barrel of a gun? The glaring problem is, of course, people don't work like this. They don't live like this. People don't want to be controlled like this. It's not going to work. Hayek argues for the minority or the atypical person in these situations. In free market, someone with a disability or seemingly disqualifier in one aspect of a job can overcompensate with the talent in another aspect. The planner, by sheer size and complexity of his job, and regardless of his intentions, must create fixed and objective terms of employment. He will create strict criteria for large swaths of jobs, whereas a free market employer, the business owner, can make subjective decisions such as the candidate's desire and ambition for the job, his drive and passion that he could show in obtaining contact and subsequently throughout the hiring process. The hiring process in the planner's world is much less personable. Again, we're taking the humanity out of it. It's not how people want to live, right? There are no options for flexibility such as part-time work or the single mom with great talent but limited time, less pay now in exchange for a commission portion of a job upon proving one's ability, or a negotiable higher salary to obtain exceptional talent in a challenging environment. The socialist argues that the employees of today's free market are being used by business owners to achieve ends other than their own. They will tell us the rich get rich off the backs of workers. For the most part, friends, I agree with this. This is true. They missed a bigger point, though. While the rich get richer, so do the workers. If they don't, they have a choice, albeit not always easy, to leave and find a better opportunity. In the planned socialist economy, the choices are limited, if available at all. The differences that bring individual value in free market economy are non-existent in a socialist planned economy. Get that. You all have skills. You all have something that makes you different than other people. They bring no value in a socialist economy. The workers truly become a means to an end and are left without any choice or much hope to change one's circumstances. It would hardly provide consolation for the worker toiling away at a mindless job that does nothing for one's spirit or talents, that he cannot move beyond that. The state is safely in the hands of a planner and out of the hands of chance. To me, that hardly sounds free. Friends, we're going to leave it at that. I appreciate you hanging around here. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever. We're on Stitcher, maybe on Google Play. I'm just getting back in this whole marketing of this thing. I don't have a whole lot of time. But friends, share this if you like what you hear. Send me some feedback. Facebook group, Real Freedom. If you're already or a Facebook page, if you're already in the Rocco DeLeo show, it's already on there. Anyhow, I'm going to leave it at that, friends, and we'll be back hopefully in the next week or so with, I've got 2 more in the can. I just need time to do what I'm doing right here. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week.